There's a moment when the kindest person you know becomes unrecognizable. Not because they've turned cruel, but because they've finally stopped abandoning themselves. Have you ever watched someone who spent their entire life absorbing everyone else's pain suddenly go silent, suddenly withdraw, suddenly say no after decades of yes? It looks like a breakdown. But Carl Jung knew something most people miss. It's actually a breakthrough the psyche has been orchestrating all along. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when you simply couldn't absorb one more person's pain, one more manipulation, one more demand on your soul. When the emotional labor you've been performing your entire life suddenly felt impossible to continue. Maybe you woke up one day and realized you were drowning in everyone else's feelings while your own went completely unacknowledged. Maybe you finally saw that the people you've been sacrificing yourself for never intended to reciprocate. Maybe you just got too tired to pretend anymore. Here's what no one tells you: that moment isn't your failure. It's your psyche's intervention. Before we dive deeper, if this resonates with your soul's journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more transformational content. Your support helps this message reach other souls who need to hear it. Jung spent his life mapping the hidden architecture of the human soul. And he discovered something profound about people we now call empaths. Those naturally gifted at feeling what others feel, at absorbing emotional atmospheres, at becoming the shock absorber for everyone around them. He knew that when you live your entire life oriented toward others' feelings while denying your own needs, your unconscious begins collecting evidence, storing injuries, preparing for revolution. Because the psyche is a self-regulating system, and it will not allow you to remain one-sided forever. What happens to all that repressed anger? All those denied needs, all that swallowed rage? Where does it go when you smile through your own pain to tend to someone else's? Jung knew exactly where it goes. Into the shadow, that constellation of everything your conscious personality refuses to acknowledge about itself. And he knew what happens when the shadow gets too full, when the imbalance becomes too extreme. The psyche compensates, violently if necessary, to restore wholeness. This is the hidden pattern playing out in your life right now. You're not broken. You're not failing at being kind. You're experiencing what Jung called enantiodromia, the principle that things transform into their opposite when taken to extremes. Your endless patience is becoming sudden boundaries. Your constant availability is becoming sacred withdrawal. Your people-pleasing is becoming self-protection. And everyone around you is confused because they've never seen this version of you before. But Jung would recognize you immediately. He'd see you're right on schedule. He'd know you're not losing yourself, you're finally finding yourself. By the end of this journey together, you'll understand that when they push you too far, something profound happens. Not destruction, but initiation. Not the end of your empathy, but the birth of conscious compassion. Not hardness, but wholeness. You'll learn the 7 stages of the empath's transformation. You'll understand why your breaking point had to happen. And you'll discover that the darkness you're experiencing right now contains exactly what you need to become, who you were always meant to be. This isn't about becoming cold or cruel. It's about becoming complete. It's about integrating what you've denied so you can finally love without losing yourself. The modern world is experiencing an epidemic of empaths used as emotional dumping grounds in narcissistic systems. Families that require one person to regulate everyone else's feelings. Relationships where one partner endlessly gives while the other endlessly takes. Workplaces that exploit your conscientiousness until you're burned out and replaced. But something is shifting. Empaths everywhere are reaching their breaking point, and what looks like individual collapse is actually collective awakening. Jung mapped this journey over 100 years ago. He left us a roadmap for exactly what you're experiencing. And the destination isn't who you used to be, it's who you're becoming. So if you're the empath who finally stopped absorbing, who finally set boundaries, who finally chose yourself welcome, you're not alone. You're not wrong. And you're about to understand why this had to happen. To understand what's happening to you, we need to understand how Jung saw the psyche itself. He didn't see the mind as a simple container of thoughts and feelings. He saw it as a complex, self-regulating ecosystem, a dynamic interplay between consciousness and the unconscious, between ego and shadow, between what we know about ourselves and what we refuse to know. At the center is the ego, your conscious sense of I. This is the part of you that makes decisions, navigates daily life, and presents yourself to the world. For the empath, the ego has typically organized itself around one dominant function: feeling. Jung identified 4 psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Most people develop 1 or 2 strongly, while the others remain less conscious. Empaths tend to live primarily through the feeling function. You orient yourself toward connection, harmony, emotional truth, and compassion. You feel your way through the world. This isn't wrong. It's a gift. But here's what Jung discovered: when one function becomes too dominant, when you live completely through one lens, the psyche becomes dangerously imbalanced. Because everything you're not being, everything you're actively refusing to be, doesn't disappear. It accumulates in the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. This is crucial to understand. The shadow is simply the repository of everything your conscious personality has deemed unacceptable. For the empath, what gets relegated to shadow anger? Selfishness, coldness, detachment, rationality without emotion, and most critically, the capacity to say no. You've been taught that being good means being endlessly available, that being loving means absorbing others' pain, that being empathetic means prioritizing everyone else's needs above your own. So you've built your entire identity on self-sacrifice, and you've pushed every opposite quality into darkness. But Jung discovered something that changes everything. The psyche operates on a law of compensation. What you deny will eventually demand expression. The more one-sided you become, the more forcefully the unconscious will attempt to correct the imbalance. Your psyche has been waiting for this breaking point. It's been engineering it. Every time someone took advantage of your kindness and you swallowed your anger, shadow grew. Every time you set aside your own needs to manage someone else's emotions, shadow grew. Every time you smiled through disrespect, absorbed projection, or let your boundaries be violated, shadow grew. And now it's full. The unconscious can no longer contain what you've been denying. The compensation has begun. This is what's happening when you suddenly feel alien to yourself. When you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. When you find yourself capable of coldness you never imagined. When detachment replaces your usual warmth, you're not being possessed by something evil. You're meeting your shadow. And your shadow contains precisely what you need to become whole. But there's another layer Jung identified that's essential to understand moral inflation. Empaths, especially those raised in dysfunctional or narcissistic family systems, often unconsciously identify with the archetype of the healer or the savior. You've made yourself responsible for others' emotional well-being. You've appointed yourself the family regulator, the relationship peacekeeper, the one who fixes and rescues. Jung called this inflation when the ego unconsciously believes itself closer to divinity than it truly is. You're not consciously thinking, "I'm God," but you're functioning as if others' salvation depends on you, as if their pain is your responsibility, as if you can love them into health. This inflation cannot endure. The self-Jung's term for the totality of the psyche, the deepest center of your being, will eventually dismantle it, often through betrayal, through exhaustion, through the very people you've been trying to save, exploiting your goodness until you collapse. When they push you too far, when they finally break your capacity to keep giving, the event serves as psychic intervention. The self is speaking, you are not God. You are human. You have limits. And you are worthy of the same compassion you've been pouring into everyone else. The shattering of this inflated self-image is devastating. It feels like failure. But it's actually the beginning of individuation, Jung's term for the process of becoming a whole conscious self. Now let's look at why empaths specifically become targets in narcissistic systems. Jung understood projection, founded the unconscious process of attributing your own denied qualities to others. Narcissists project their own denied vulnerability and shame onto empaths. They see in you what they cannot tolerate in themselves: softness, need, emotional sensitivity. But there's a hook. Empaths were often programmed in childhood to become the family's emotional regulator. If you grew up in a dysfunctional or narcissistic family system, you learned early that your value came from managing others' feelings, from being the good child, from absorbing chaos so others didn't have to feel it. Your empathy was weaponized against you. Your natural gift for emotional attunement was exploited to maintain family homeostasis. You became fused with the system, unable to distinguish your feelings from theirs, unable to know where you ended and they began. Jung would say you never properly differentiated. You remained in psychological participation, mystique, merged and meshed without clear boundaries between self and other. This set you up for a lifetime of relationships, where you unconsciously repeat the pattern, absorbing, regulating, sacrificing yourself to keep the system stable. But here's what the narcissist doesn't understand. Every system that requires an empath to remain unconscious is inherently unstable, because the empath's unconscious is collecting evidence, building pressure, preparing for the moment when the whole arrangement collapses. Your psyche has been gathering every moment of disrespect, every boundary violation, every time you swallowed your own needs. It's all been recorded in the unconscious. And when the pressure becomes unbearable, the unconscious forces the issue. You reach the breaking point, not because you're weak, but because your psyche is wise. It knows you cannot continue this way and survive. It knows that what's being demanded of you is the sacrifice of your own selfhood. And so, it intervenes, forcefully if necessary, through shadow eruption, through collapse, through the sudden inability to continue performing the role you've been playing. The empath who is pushed too far isn't having a breakdown. They're having a breakthrough orchestrated by the deepest wisdom of the psyche itself. Jung wrote, "The unconscious is not a demoniacal monster, but a natural entity, which as far as moral sense, aesthetic taste, and intellectual judgment go, is completely neutral. It becomes dangerous only when our conscious attitude to it is hopelessly wrong." Your conscious attitude has been hopelessly wrong. You've believed your worth depends on endless giving. You've identified goodness with self-abandonment. You've made empathy synonymous with having no boundaries. The unconscious is now correcting this attitude, not to destroy you, but to save you. What's about to unfold is the most important journey of your life. The death of who you thought you had to be, and the birth of who you actually are. Let's walk through the 7 stages of transformation that occur when they push the empath too far. These aren't linear. You might cycle through them, revisit them at deeper levels. But Jung's framework helps us understand the pattern. Stage 1. The psychic rupture. It doesn't happen dramatically. There's no lightning bolt moment. Instead, there's a quiet, definitive shift inside you. One day you simply cannot do it anymore. You cannot absorb one more person's anxiety. You cannot manage one more emotional crisis that isn't yours. You cannot smile through one more violation of your dignity. Something ruptures. The mechanism that's been operating your entire life, the automatic yes, the instinctive people-pleasing, the compulsive caretaking just stops working. This is Jung's enantiodromia in action. When anything is pushed to its extreme, it transforms into its opposite. Your endless patience becomes sudden refusal. Your constant warmth becomes unexpected coldness. Your availability becomes complete withdrawal. And you feel alien to yourself. You look at the person you're being and think, who is this? Where did my kindness go? Why can't I care anymore? But Jung would tell you this isn't the absence of who you are. This is the presence of who you've been denying. The shadow has erupted into consciousness, and it's bringing exactly what you need the capacity to protect yourself. You might go no contact with someone you've been trying to save for years. You might end a relationship everyone expected you to tolerate forever. You might simply stop responding, stop explaining, stop engaging. And everyone is shocked, because they've never seen you set a boundary before. They've only known the version of you that absorbs everything. But this isn't cruelty. This is the psyche's emergency intervention. Your unconscious is forcing you to stop the pattern that was destroying you. Jung would say you're not being possessed by something evil. This is the return of what you denied. Your anger is surfacing because it's been repressed too long. Your selfishness is emerging because you've been selfless to the point of self-destruction. Stage 2. The shattering of moral inflation. Now comes the devastating realization you cannot save anyone. The identity you've built your entire life on the helper, the healer, the one who rescues, crumbles. Because the people you've been sacrificing yourself for don't actually want to be saved. They want a permanent emotional supplier. They want someone to regulate their feelings so they never have to grow. And you've been playing God, unconsciously believing that your love, your empathy, your endless patience would eventually transform them. That if you could just absorb enough of their pain, then they'd finally heal. Jung warned extensively about this inflation. When you identify with the healer archetype without consciousness, you lose sight of your own humanity. You forget that you too have limits. You too need care. You too deserve reciprocity. The self, the deepest wisdom of your psyche, now dismantles this inflation. Often through betrayal, the person you've been trying to save exploits your goodness one final time. Or they discard you the moment you can no longer serve their needs. Or they simply reveal they never valued you as a person, only as a function. This shattering is excruciating. It feels like failure. You grieve the savior identity. You mourn the belief that your love could fix anyone. But Jung would tell you this grief is sacred. Because what's dying isn't your capacity to care. What's dying is the illusion that caring means self-erasure. What's dying is the false belief that you're responsible for other people's emotional well-being. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The darkness you're being forced to see is this: you've been using empathy as a defense against your own pain. You've been focusing on everyone else's feelings so you never have to feel your own. You've been trying to earn love through service, because you don't believe you're worthy of love simply for existing. The inflation shatters, and you're left with the truth you're not the savior. You're a human being who deserves the same compassion you've been giving away. Stage 3. The withdrawal negredo. Jung studied medieval alchemy as a metaphor for psychological transformation. The first stage of the alchemical process was called negredo, the blackening, a descent into chaos that precedes renewal. This is where you are now. You've withdrawn from relationships, from helping, from the role you've always played. Maybe you've gone minimal contact or no contact. Maybe you've stopped engaging with family dynamics. Maybe you've just retreated into yourself. You feel disillusioned, bitter, questioning everything that once gave your life meaning. If being kind only led to exploitation, what's the point? If empathy only made you a target, why feel at all? If love meant constant sacrifice, maybe you're done with love. This darkness is heavy. You might feel depressed, numb, or existentially lost. The old self is dying, the persona of constant goodness and availability is disintegrating. And you don't yet know who you are without it. Friends and family might try to pull you back into the old pattern. You're not yourself, they say. What happened to the old you? They want you to return to being their emotional regulator because your withdrawal destabilizes the entire system. But Jung would tell you, stay in the darkness. This descent is sacred. This is the negrito, the necessary dissolution that precedes transformation. He wrote in Psychology and Alchemy, the experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego. Your ego identified with being the helper. Now that identity is dying, and it feels like you're dying. But you're not dying. You're composting. The old self is breaking down to become fertile soil for the new self. This phase strips away sentimentality. It teaches you the difference between compassion and compliance, between empathy and enmeshment, between love and self-abandonment. In this darkness, you learn that not all pain deserves your empathy, that some people are committed to their dysfunction, that you cannot love someone into consciousness if they're determined to remain unconscious. These are brutal lessons, but they're necessary, because on the other side of this darkness is something you've never had: discernment. Stage 4, shadow integration, begins slowly in the darkness. You begin to see what's been living in your shadow, and you begin the terrifying work of reclaiming it. You discover, I have anger, real legitimate anger about how I've been treated. And this anger isn't wrong, it's information. It's telling me my boundaries were violated. You discover I can be selfish. I can prioritize my own needs. I can say no without explanation. And this doesn't make me a bad person, it makes me a person with a self. You discover I don't always care. Sometimes I feel nothing about someone else's drama. And this numbness isn't cruelty, it's my psyche protecting me from what would destroy me. These discoveries are frightening because they contradict everything you've believed about yourself. You've spent your entire life identifying as the kind one, the caring one, the one who always feels. But Jung knew these qualities you've been afraid of. Anger, selfishness, coldness aren't evil. They're the rejected parts of yourself that contain your power. Your anger contains your ability to protect yourself. Your selfishness contains your right to exist. Your coldness contains your capacity for discernment. Integration doesn't mean becoming these qualities exclusively. It means having access to them when you need them. It means no longer being one-sided. You begin learning to turn your empathy inward. For most empaths, the person who needed empathy most was always you. And you've been so busy attending to everyone else's pain that you've completely neglected your own. This is revolutionary, feeling compassion for yourself, recognizing your own needs without shame, giving yourself permission to matter. You begin setting boundaries, internal boundaries, first recognizing when you're absorbing versus when you're witnessing, learning to stay in your thinking process while managing your feelings, understanding that you can empathize without acting on it. Then external boundaries, non-negotiable ones. I'm not available for this. This doesn't work for me. I need space. No. And here's what shocks you: the boundaries hold. Because they're not coming from the wavering, people-pleasing ego anymore. They're coming from something deeper, from the integrated self that knows its own worth. Stage 5, reclaiming the warrior. Archetype. Jung spoke of archetypes, universal patterns of human experience that live in the collective unconscious. For most of your life, You've been living primarily through the mother archetype, the one who gives endlessly, nurtures, and self-sacrifices. But there are other archetypes available to you. And now, the warrior is waking up. The warrior doesn't mean violence or aggression. In its mature form, the warrior is the protector of what's sacred. And what's sacred is your own being. You find your voice. After years of silence, after decades of swallowing your truth to keep the peace you speak. You say what you actually think. You express what you actually feel. You correct people who misrepresent you. And you discover you can handle their reactions. You can tolerate their disappointment. You can survive their disapproval. The narcissist or manipulator who has controlled you through guilt and emotional drama suddenly finds their tactics don't work anymore. You stop feeding their need for constant validation. You stop absorbing their projections. You stop responding to their provocations. Their control crumbles. Not because they've changed, they haven't. But because you have. You're no longer the same person who could be manipulated through empathy. When they rage at you, trying to provoke a reaction, you feel nothing. Or you feel something, but you don't act on it. Their words become like someone calling you a Coca-Cola. The accusation is so absurd, it doesn't even land. You see their attempts to control you as pathetic rather than powerful. An unhappy person trying to make you unhappy. An unwell person trying to control you and the family. And you're free. Not because you've become hard, but because you've become solid. You know who you are, and their opinion no longer defines you. Stage 6. The birth of the wounded healer. Jung identified an archetype he called the wounded healer, the one who can truly help others because they've been wounded themselves and done the work to heal. This is different from the unconscious helper who tries to save everyone to avoid their own pain. The wounded healer has descended into their own darkness. They've met their shadow. They've integrated what they denied. And they've emerged with wisdom. You can now offer compassion without losing yourself in someone else's experience. You can hold space without absorbing their pain. You can witness someone's struggle without feeling responsible to fix it. Your empathy becomes wise, discerning, informed by boundaries and self-knowledge. You understand now that true helping isn't rescuing. It's creating a space where someone can find their own strength. It's reflecting truth without attachment to whether they accept it. It's offering support while honoring your own limits. Having touched your own darkness, you no longer fear the darkness in others. You're not threatened by their shadow because you've made peace with your own. Your presence transforms. People describe you as both softer and stronger, more compassionate and more boundaried, gentler and more formidable. This is the gold Jung spoke of. This is what was forged in the darkness. A self that can love without abandoning itself. A heart that can care without breaking. A soul that knows its own worth. Stage 7. Choosing peace over toxic bonds. The final stage is the hardest choice, self-preservation over system maintenance. Jung understood that individuation, becoming your true self, always conflicts with collective expectations. Your family wants you to remain the emotional regulator. Your friend group wants you to stay in your familiar role. Society tells you that family is everything. Blood is thicker than water, you should forgive and reconnect. But you've learned a profound truth: I can live without a narcissistic family member. I cannot live without inner peace. This choice requires courage. You're going against social norms, family loyalty programming, and your own fear of loneliness. You're choosing yourself even though the system punishes individuation. Some relationships end completely. Necessary endings, as psychologist Henry Cloud calls them, because some bonds are too toxic to maintain and healing requires separation. Other relationships transform into minimal functional contact. You stay connected in name, only limiting interaction to what protects your peace. And you grieve. You grieve the family you wish you had, the parent you deserved, the relationships that could have been reciprocal but never were. But you also celebrate. Because you've reclaimed your life. You've stepped out of a role that was killing you. You've chosen wholeness over acceptance. Jung wrote about this moment. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You are no longer living someone else's script. You are no longer performing a role in someone else's drama. You are finally, powerfully, consciously yourself. Understanding the theory is one thing. Living it is another. So let's make this practical. How do you actually live as an integrated empath? How do you maintain these transformations in daily life? First, you need to understand the difference between healthy empathy and codependent fusion. Healthy empathy means you can feel with someone while maintaining awareness that their feelings are theirs and your feelings are yours. You can attune to their emotional state without absorbing it as your own. You can care about their pain without becoming responsible for fixing it. Codependent fusion, what Jung would call participation mystique, means you can't distinguish where you end and they begin. Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. Their pain becomes your obligation. Their emotional state dictates your behavior. The difference is boundaries, not walls that shut people out, but membranes that let good in and keep harm out. Psychologist Jerry Wise talks about two types of differentiation. Internal differentiation and the ability to distinguish between your thoughts and feelings. To stay in your rational mind while acknowledging emotions without being ruled by them. To recognize when you're feeling something versus when you're absorbing someone else's feeling. External differentiation and the ability to be connected to others without abandoning yourself. To maintain your values and identity even when others disapprove. To be in relationship while remaining a sovereign individual. Carl Jung Empath and personal development work centers on building both kinds of differentiation. This is how you remain empathetic while protecting your psychic space. Judith Orloff in the Empath Survival Guide offers practical tools empaths can learn to distinguish feelings from thoughts. You can purposefully stay in your thinking process while managing feelings with awareness rather than reactivity. You can practice asking, is this emotion mine or someone else's? When you sense you're absorbing, you can consciously choose to witness instead. To observe someone's emotional state with compassion while maintaining your own center. Integration isn't a one-time event. It's a practice. Your shadow will continue to emerge new layers, deeper patterns, and you need tools to work with it consciously. Start a shadow journal. Every time you have a strong emotional reaction, ask, what in me is being triggered? What quality am I seeing in them that I've denied in myself? What am I refusing to acknowledge about this situation? What would it mean if I accepted this part of myself? Work with anger without shame. Anger is boundary information. When you feel angry, ask, where was my boundary violated? What need of mine is being ignored? What am I not allowing myself to want? Practice saying no in low-stakes situations first. Build your capacity. Notice the fear that arises. Sit with the discomfort. Discover that you survive others' disappointment. Learn to identify projections. When someone accuses you of something that doesn't fit, ask, is this actually about them? Are they projecting their own quality onto me? Sometimes the answer is, yes, you do have that quality and need to own it. Other times it's pure projection and you can let it go without internalizing it. Regular check-ins with yourself. Am I abandoning myself right now? Am I operating from my true self or from an old program? Am I choosing this or complying out of fear? Shadow work isn't about eliminating these parts of yourself. It's about befriending them, understanding them, and integrating them consciously. When you change, your relationships must change too. You're no longer playing the old role, and the system will resist. Some relationships can evolve. For these, you need clear communication. I've realized I haven't been honoring my own needs in this relationship. Going forward, I need to set some boundaries. Expect resistance. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will not celebrate your newfound selfhood. They'll test you. They'll try to guilt you back into the old pattern. They'll tell you you've changed, as if that's an accusation rather than a triumph. Your job isn't to convince them. Your job is to maintain your boundaries despite their reactions. For some relationships, minimal functional contact is the answer. You stay connected for practical reasons, family gatherings, shared responsibilities, but you limit emotional engagement. You share nothing vulnerable. You don't seek connection or understanding. You interact with professional courtesy and nothing more. For other relationships, no contact is the only answer. When someone is actively harmful, when they cannot respect even basic boundaries when staying connected, means sacrificing your own well-being, you have the right to end it. Completely, permanently, without guilt. Find your people. Relationships built on reciprocity, where empathy flows both directions, where your needs matter as much as theirs. These relationships feel different, less draining, more nourishing. They give as much as they take. This might be the most revolutionary practice, becoming as empathetic toward yourself as you've been toward others. Start with self-compassion. When you notice yourself in pain, speak to yourself the way you'd speak to a dear friend. Not with harsh judgment, but with gentle understanding. Learn to recognize your needs without shame. You have needs. This doesn't make you weak or selfish. It makes you human, and your needs deserve to be met. Practice checking in with yourself first. Before you respond to someone's request, before you absorb someone's crisis, ask, what do I need right now? What do I have capacity for? What would honor my well-being? Develop somatic awareness. Your body knows things your mind doesn't. Tension in your chest might be telling you someone's energy doesn't feel safe. Fatigue might be telling you you've given too much. Nausea might be telling you you're absorbing something toxic. Listen to your body's wisdom. It's been trying to protect you all along. Create space for your own emotional processing. You've spent your life processing everyone else's feelings. Now you need to feel your own. Cry when you need to cry. Rage when you need to rage. Rest when you're exhausted. Your feelings matter. The path isn't linear. You'll face challenges, and it's important to know they're normal. Guilt is the biggest one. You'll feel guilty for setting boundaries, for saying no, for prioritizing yourself. This guilt has been programmed into you since childhood. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, it means you're doing something different. When guilt arises, remind yourself, I am not responsible for other people's emotional reactions to my boundaries. Their disappointment is not my emergency. My needs matter as much as anyone else's. Fear of being selfish will plague you. You'll worry that prioritizing yourself makes you narcissistic. But here's the truth. Asking this question means you're not narcissistic. Narcissists don't worry about being selfish. They assume their needs should dominate. Loneliness might hit hard. When you stop playing the old role, some people leave. The community that valued you as a function no longer wants you as a person. This loss is real and painful, but it creates space for authentic connection, for relationships where you're valued for who you are, not what you do for others. You might swing to overcorrection. After years of having no boundaries, you might temporarily become too detached, too rigid, too defensive. This is normal. The pendulum swings before it finds center. be patient with yourself. Integration takes time. You're learning to walk a middle path between fusion and isolation, between self-sacrifice and selfishness. Self-doubt will whisper, "Am I the narcissist? Am I the problem?" The fact that you're asking means you're not. Keep doing your work. Keep choosing consciousness. Build a support system. Find a therapist who understands narcissistic family systems and trauma. Join communities of others doing this work. Read books by Jerry Wise on differentiation, Judith Orloff on empaths, and explore Jungian analysis if you can access it. You cannot do this work alone. You've been isolated too long. You need witnesses who understand. Resources matter. The Road to Self program, Jerry Wise mentions, teaches differentiation. Jungian analysts can guide you through shadow work and individuation. Trauma-informed therapists can help you heal the wounds that made you vulnerable to narcissistic dynamics. Carl Jung, Empath and Personal Development, is about integrating both the wisdom of depth psychology and practical tools for daily living. Theory without practice remains abstract. Practice without theory lacks direction. You need both. Eventually, you find your way to what Jung called the transcendent function and the ability to hold opposites in tension and find a third way. You're neither the doormat you were nor the fortress you might temporarily become. You're permeable but boundaried, empathetic but discerning, loving but self-honoring. You can give generously when you choose to, because you're giving from fullness rather than depletion. You can receive gracefully because you believe you're worthy of care. You can walk away from what harms you without guilt because you know your peace is sacred. This is integration. This is wholeness. This is what happens when the empath finally becomes conscious. Jung made a promise that sustained him through his own descent into the unconscious. The gold is in the dark. Everything you've experienced, the pain, the betrayal, the collapse, the shadow work, the isolation, wasn't meaningless suffering. It was the crucible, the alchemical vessel where your soul's gold was being refined. What have you gained through this descent? You've gained sight. You can now see manipulation before it hooks you. You recognize narcissistic patterns. You identify codependent dynamics. You know when someone is trying to make their emotional regulation your responsibility. You've gained discernment. You can distinguish between people who want genuine connection and people who want emotional supply, between relationships that nourish you and relationships that drain you, between your own feelings and absorbed feelings. You've gained selfhood. For the first time in your life, you know who you are, separate from others' needs and expectations. You have preferences, boundaries, and values that aren't borrowed or performed. You exist. The empath who survives their shadow doesn't become less empathetic. They become wisely empathetic. Their compassion is no longer compulsive, it's conscious. They choose when to engage and when to protect their energy. Your kindness is now earned, not automatic. It's active, discriminating, and luminous, not the glow of naivete, but the calm light of someone who has survived their own darkness and emerged whole. You are no longer a mirror for others' wounds. You are no longer a receptacle for projection. You are no longer the family emotional regulator or the relationship shock absorber. You are a conscious bearer of light, born from shadow. Let's name who you've become clearly so you can recognize yourself. You are not less empathetic. You're wisely empathetic. You can feel with others without losing yourself in their experience. You give from fullness, not depletion. When you offer support, it comes from genuine choice and surplus energy, not from compulsion or fear of rejection. You love without abandoning yourself. You can maintain deep connections while honoring your own needs and limits. You see manipulation without being hooked. Guilt trips, gaslighting, emotional blackmail. You recognize these tactics and refuse to engage. You hold space without losing space. You can be present to someone's struggle without making it your emergency or your responsibility. You are whole, light and shadow integrated, capable of both compassion and ruthless boundary setting. Gentle when appropriate, fierce when necessary. This integration gives you options you never had before. You're no longer locked into one response pattern. You can adapt flow and choose your engagement consciously. Here's something profound: when one person individuates, everyone around them is confronted. Your family must face what they lost when they exploited your goodness. Your friends must examine why they valued your self-sacrifice. The narcissist must find a new supply source. But more importantly, other empaths watching you transform see permission. They see that it's possible to change, that boundaries don't make you a bad person, that choosing yourself doesn't mean becoming heartless. Your liberation becomes their hope. You're breaking generational patterns. If you came from a dysfunctional family where empaths were exploited and narcissists were enabled, you're ending that cycle. The next generation won't inherit this programming if you heal it in yourself. You're modeling healthy boundaries for anyone watching. Your children, if you have them, learn that self-respect is non-negotiable. Your friends learn that reciprocity is required. Your community learns that empathy doesn't mean self-erasure. This is the quiet revolution of individuation. One conscious person at a time, we transform the collective. Carl Jung, Empath, and personal development is a lifelong journey. This transformation you're experiencing isn't a destination, it's a new way of being that continues to deepen. You'll cycle through these stages again at deeper levels. New wounds will surface. New shadow material will emerge. New opportunities for integration will present themselves. Each time someone pushes you, you'll have more tools. Each time you're challenged, you'll respond from greater consciousness. The spiral continues upward. The question shifts from, why is this happening to me, to, what is this trying to teach me, from, how do I fix this person, to, how do I honor myself in this situation? You become curious about your triggers rather than ashamed of them. You become grateful for boundaries rather than guilty about them. You become protective of your peace rather than apologetic for claiming it. Jung's vision was for conscious humanity individuals who have done the work of integration, who can hold both light and shadow, who can be in community without losing themselves. You are becoming that vision. Every time you choose consciousness over compulsion, integration over one-sidedness, selfhood over approval seeking, you're contributing to the evolution of collective consciousness. Your breaking point was your breakthrough. Honor it. When they pushed you too far, they didn't break you. They freed you. Your shadow wasn't your enemy. It was your ally waiting to be known, holding exactly what you needed to become whole. You are not the family emotional regulator. You are not the relationship shock absorber. You are not responsible for anyone's healing but your own. You are a whole human being, worthy of respect, reciprocity, and rest, deserving of the same compassion you've been pouring into everyone else. This is individuation. This is wholeness. This is you, finally. The journey through darkness has given you something precious, yourself. And now that you have yourself, you can never be truly lost again. Welcome home. If this resonated with your soul, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. What stage are you in right now? Are you in the rupture, the negredo, the integration, the transformation? Share your experience. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Your voice matters. Your journey matters. If you want more content on Jungian psychology, shadow work, and the empath's journey to wholeness, subscribe to this channel. This is how we heal together, but individually whole. We're building a community of people who refuse to abandon themselves anymore, who choose consciousness over compliance, who know that their breaking point was actually their breakthrough. You're not alone in this, and you're not wrong for changing. The work continues. The individuation continues, and you're exactly where you need to be. Thank you for watching. Thank you for doing this sacred work. And thank you for choosing yourself. Be well. Be whole. Be free.